I'm back again breaking down yet another team's finish. Today I'll be breaking down the Kansas City Royals on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we are number one source for fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Matthew On A. You can find me on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at Matthew_on A. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the bell below to subscribe to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, on Spotify, or wherever you may listen. Really helps out the show. Also, if you want a little bit more than what we offer in a 30-minute podcast, check us out on Subtext. Become a member of the Diamond Club. We'll help you get to that championship in 2025. You're going to need all that off-season content. Links in the description below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, guys, we got a great episode for you, and I'm pretty hyped. Kansas City Royal, a fun team to talk about. There's about 3-4 guys that are truly fantasy impactful guys and then the rest are kind of like, but we got to go over it. We got to talk about it. There's options. We'll kind of go from there. But obviously I think we'll open up with the big Bambino, the best play. Well, actually before that, let's open up with the team's record, 86-76. Obviously made it to the playoffs, did well, just not well enough, unfortunately. Team was good, surprisingly, with the names and things like that. Truthfully, I feel like if they had Vinnie Pasquantino, things would have looked a little bit better for them. But at the same time, it is what it is. Bobby Witt's a stud. And yeah, so is Cole Reagan. That's about like my two favorite players off this, probably everybody's. But ultimately, like the team does need a little bit more girth, in my opinion. I don't feel like the supporting cast is as wonderful, especially if the team wants to improve and get better as it's on its own and continue to grow and see the playoffs again. Truthfully, so I hope that they can bring in more talent and things like that, and kind of just hopefully free agency is better to them because their prospects in their farm system isn't the ideal situation. I look through the list and there's nobody that really like screams out to me and says, "Hey, like, oh my God, they're going to get better for next year." But ultimately, it is what it is. Hopefully, again, like they can bring in some free agencies, which I think they got a draw having one of the best players in the league, a great first baseman, and some great pitching to go along with it. Let's see what happens and kind of go from there. But let's break down Bobby Witt Jr. now. Obviously plays third for the Kansas City Royals and had a fantastic season. Junior year essentially, or essentially more like I would say junior year, and did not disappoint. Lived up to the draft price wholeheartedly and was absolutely fantastic. 636 at bats, 125 runs, 45 doubles, 11 triples, 32 home runs, 109 ribs, 31 stolen bases, 57 walks to 106 strikeouts, batted .332 on the season, an OBP of 389, a slug of 588, and an OPS of 977. He's an exciting player. I'm really glad that he returned on his draft price and was able to just prove that, hey, he's one of the best, best players in all of baseball, truthfully. I love to see the 30-30. I love seeing exactly what he's doing. It's incredible. The only thing is I wish the stolen base numbers were a little bit more. I wish we would have gotten to the 40 range and seen more of a 30-40 that would have set the difference apart and could have made him finish as like the number one overall. And you know what? Like, it is what it is. I think that next year it's definitely in the realm of possibility. The dude has elite sprint speed and things like that. He hits the ball great. So, and he does know how to get on base because he also walks a ton. So, Bobby Witt Jr. is a fantastic player that I think is going to just continue to be successful. Definitely a top 3 pick for me next year. And I'm super excited to draft. I mean, there's not much you could really say that's negative in regards to him. Again, outside of me nitpicking, saying, "Oh, I wish there was more stolen bases because I'm super greedy with my, number 3, number 2 overall pick." That's the only thing of note. I wish there was more stolen bases. The runs and ribbies are absolutely fantastic, and the home runs are right on par. I think that one year we're going to see a very special season where we see 40 home runs, but you know, I would love to see just the stolen base numbers, maybe not hit 49. Maybe that's not repeatable for him, but high 30s, like 38, 39, or possibly 40 and 42. I think he's definitely repeatable for him. The dude is absolutely bananas in those regards. I definitely just want to see more from him. I'm super excited. A guy that's super consistent in the first round, a guy that I will be a no-brainer when picking. Because here's the thing: when you're in the first round, you don't want to like kind of take a lot of risk at the beginning. You want somebody that's pretty much guaranteed to return on draft price, and it's going to be him. Essentially, you're just looking at you're in for the last 3 years, he's pretty much showed up. He was exactly who you drafted him to be in his rookie year. Showed up. Obviously, there was some more speed, didn't have to pay it. Sophomore year, obviously the value was a lot higher on him, but still returned very nicely. Obviously, that 30 home run, 49 stolen base season with batting 276, and the improvement continued in both the batting average, power, and in stolen base numbers. And then he follows it up in 2024, being consistent, improved in the batting average again. And obviously, we saw some negative regression in stolen bases. So Bobby Witt Jr. as a whole, I think, is somebody that if he's continuing to do this year in and year out, he's a no-brain pick. Always going to be a top 3, top 4 pick for me, depending on what brings the next year in terms of when I do my rankings, who I'm feeling comfortable with. He's going to be a guy we're going to be talking about. That's going to be honestly the sure thing every single year. That's going to be that pick every single year. Bobby Witt Jr. Grand Slam pick for 2025. Let's move on. Let's talk about Vinnie Pasquantino. Honestly, somebody that Dom and I were truly like touting, like, hey, you need to draft, like this kid's gonna be good. You need to really draft him. He came at a sweet value and really, really didn't disappoint as long as you held him through the second half. Let's put it that way. First half, it took a little bit. He had to dust off that rust and didn't really get going. Well, I wouldn't say second half. He barely played the second half, but took him a little bit to get going, essentially, right? Like April essentially batted 208, but he had 4 home runs, 14 ribs, and walked more than he struck out. So for points leagues, he really wasn't that bad. But then, May was definitely better, batted 261, only 2 home runs, but 22 ribs. Definitely looked good with the 8 doubles and a single triple. And then, you looked at June, you're like, man, the rust is off, right? He batted 276, he had 19 ribs, he had 4 home runs, a triple, 7 doubles, and was just doing his thing. And July was pretty darn good as well. He had 2 home runs, 17 ribs, batted 309. Was really kicking it off. Obviously, he wanted a little bit more on the power side, but then August really kicked in and was stellar. 7 home runs that month, 25 ribs. Even chipped in a stolen base and was batting 261. The batting average is a little bit down, but you know what? He's killing it. He showed off exactly who he's going to be for all of us in the coming years, right? He's going to be a guy that's going to hit for power. We clearly can see that. His pace was definitely at 25, and if not more at this point. And I think he's got a 40 home run season in him. He's got the exit velocity. He's got the plate discipline. He's got everything you need that you would call a great batter for. And I think Vinnie Pasquantino for next year, 2025, depending on the injury, obviously, and what his timetable looks like, I'm definitely drafting him. I think he's going to come at a discount too. He's going to be, I think a top 10 first baseman, but, probably closer to 10. But, ultimately, you just got to, why would I want to miss out on this talent? You just got to pray that he doesn't get hurt and have a season ending career, essentially, because when healthy, he's one of the better bats in baseball. Honestly, I really can't say, anything bad about the kid. Truthfully, he is, like I said, one of my favorite players in all of baseball. I'm actually trying to find out what they're trying to think for his injury timeline and when he's going to be back. Expected return. Sorry, I didn't have that up already. 2025. Let's see. So essentially, they were actually hoping he would return on during the World Series run. So, he broke his right thumb, and that essentially kept him out. But they were hoping to roll him out during the playoffs, and I'm not even sure if he played, truthfully. Excuse my ignorance on that one, but the fact that he's already going to be back, we're expecting to be back, let's go. Next year, he's going to start off a full season. Not going to miss any time. Going to have a full off season to actually train and prepare. I have a feeling we're going to see a serious breakout. He's going to make my breakout list. I know we did it way too early breakouts. He's going to be on my breakout list this year. I cannot wait. Vinnie Pasquantino is going to be a slam dunk pick for 2025. Coming up next, we got guys like Michael Garcia with what his fantasy value looks like. MJ Melendez and Salvador Perez. How are we handling them for next season? All that coming up next. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only really real money daily fantasy platform with injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets hurt right in the middle of the game, even if your player leaves at halftime and doesn't return. Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. Prize Picks is the best way to play and get real money action right there on your phone. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks puts its members first, so withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and use the code. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action this football season. Which players are going off, which players aren't. Make your picks today in less than 60 seconds to turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day? Have you had to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories with all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free on the Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Introducing the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast Diamond Club on Subtext, your ultimate fantasy baseball companion. Rely on our dynamic content this offseason and get our redraft rankings, dynasty rankings, prospect rankings, sleepers, breakouts, busts, so much more that you can't get in this 30-minute podcast. Our individual picks, our separated picks, and all you guys are going to get is pretty much our collective picks out here in the regular zone. So if you want to see who Dom and I disagree on that may not be on the same list, you're going to want to check that out and also see how we value players differently. So, and plus, on top of that, you'll be able to ask us all the questions. The link's in the description below. You have free 2 weeks when you join up. Check us out. All right, guys, let's get back into it. Let's talk about Mr. Michael Garcia. Obviously, he was interesting. Good pickup this year, especially if you drafted him late. The first half of the season looked good for him, and then kind of like didn't really do it. You saw him more on the waiver wires versus everybody chasing to go get him. When he was hot, he was good, and when he wasn't, he wasn't. Let's put it that way. But he was great production of stolen bases and was able to at least get on base and get some runs, right? 575 at bats, 84 runs, 27 doubles, 5 triples, 7 home runs, 58 ribs, 37 stolen bases, walked about 42 times, 103 strikeouts, had a batting average of 231, an OBP of 281, a slug of 332, and an OPS of 614. Now, I'm going to bring up the splits of the first half, second half, kind of maybe break it down a little bit by month here, and we'll kind of go from there. So first half, batting average really wasn't anything impressive. It was pretty much 230 and 234 between the first and second half. But there was times when he was really killing it, like especially in March, right? He had 5 stolen bases that month with 15 ribs and was batting 305, was looking real good. And then, again in July looked good. He had 4 stolen bases and 5 ribs, but batting 276. And the rest of the season was kind of meh, 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 meh. Everybody was waiting for okay, May was kind of like a little bit of a breakout and kind of show, I'm here party, and then kind of did nothing. He had good stolen base numbers. Like in June, he had about 8 in that month. In August, he had about 8. But you're also not going to rock him out there with a 142 batting average and a 250 batting average. And even in September, he had 4 stolen bases, but 161, batting average. He wasn't like a true source of fantasy value because he didn't really do anything besides get you runs and get you stolen bases and pretty much mutilated your batting average at a good chunk of the time. I made a bad take. Well, not a bad take. I said something negative about Michael Garcia, and I got ripped apart at the beginning of the season. Now I kind of look like a genius, but everybody will forget that. But ultimately, I wasn't really a fan. I wasn't buying it. With Michael Garcia too, you look at him and just never really gave me the sexy fantasy options. Let's put it that way, right? I was never really drawn to say, hey, this kid can be good. You look at what he's done in the past. He's really just been a stolen base producer and, had a batting average of 272 through 464 at bats in 23 and definitely wasn't able to follow that through this year. But he was no different in terms of, 2023 and 2024 in terms of what his fantasy outcome could be. the ceiling is pretty low, but the floor is pretty meh. Stolen bases. If he can get that batting average up to at least 260 and run production with that team, then yeah, like he's a decent fantasy pick. But like I'm not drafting him in the top 100. Like I'm not even drafting him, I think, in the top 20, the top 120. Like he's just not a guy that I'm going to be really anxious to pick. I'll probably avoid at all costs and let him be on somebody else's team, truthfully, because I just don't believe in him. I'm going to be honest. Like I'm just not a fan, and it is what it is with Michael Garcia. So like for me, he's going to be a pass, and I hope that I don't even have to put him in the bust category, and people are smart enough not to draft him at a high price because everybody was just enamored by those couple months. So yeah, just not a fan. Let's move into MJ Melendez, a guy like for me, he's really on the show more of a talking point than he is for anything else, I guess, for me. MJ Melendez, had all the upside in the world a couple years ago. You asked me what I thought of him, and it's much different than as of late. 2023 was a real disappointment, and same thing for 2024. He only was able to get about 17 home runs this season, batted 206. You know, the ribs department was at 44 and the runs department is at 44 as well. Like he really doesn't really contribute for fantasy at all. I'm not really a fan. I hated where you had to rake him because outfield was so ugly this year. But at the same time, I'm like, man, whatever. Like I really tried to avoid him at all costs. He's a guy like I'm gonna flat out say we're not gonna target next year. He shouldn't be on anybody's draft boards. And when he's hot, I'll ride him out. And when he's not, I'm dropping him like he's hot. He's not a guy I'm going to be looking to roster it all through the draft season. Maybe throughout waiver wire pickups and such, he'll be more of a notable mention and somebody I'm going to want to ride the hot hand with. But other than that, no thank you. So let's move on. Let's talk about Salvador Perez. Salvador Perez, another guy, catcher, first base eligibility, and he had a pretty good season. You know, 590 at bats, 58 runs, you know, 28 doubles, no triples, 27 home runs, 104 ribs. You know, walked about 44 times, so 129 strikeouts, batted about 271, 330 OBP, a slug of 456, and a OPS of 786. Now, I was wrong on him. I'll be honest. I just haven't been a fan of him. I think everybody was pretty much just chasing that 2021 season where he hit 48 home runs and had a mega season. And I didn't think the power was going to be as good. And, 23 home runs back-to-back seasons since then, 22 and 23. Kind of just told a different story. This year, he decided to turn it around at age 34 and kind of like kill it. But who would have guessed an age 34 batter would be able to put out this kind of season? 27 home runs and 104 ribs is really fantastic. Batting average is great, but the runs were kind of meh, 58 runs. And with the walks and strikeout version, I'm just like, not really feeling it. So, like, for me with Salvador Perez, he doesn't get a bump, but any which way, shape, or form for me. But, like, he does go into the draftable category. Luckily, he didn't have to pay a premium. I hope we don't have to pay a premium based off of the season now. I might trust him. He's going to be lower, too. He's going to be lower in my rankings in terms of catcher, just based off the fact that, like, he's older, Father Time is undefeated, and they can catch up to him anytime. All my concerns are still there, but at the same time, now that he's producing and shown that at least he can be consistent over the last 3 years, I want to say that, like, I'm willing to possibly take a chance on him because also too, you got to look at it like what are the options going to be when I'm ready to tell you to pick a catcher, and it's going to be later, so he might be somebody that might be there. We'll see. I think he'll be there probably around like pick 150, 160, just like he was this year. If he's getting drafted in the top 100, we're avoiding him at all costs. But this year was really great across all boards. There isn't a single thing, even in his underlining stats, that will tell me he's not going to be able to repeat, without minute negative regression, like maybe a home run less, maybe a couple ribs less, maybe the batting average comes down a little bit less. Like that might be the one that maybe kind of comes down to like 250, 255. But with the home run numbers, the ribby numbers, I'm okay with it. I'm just praying that the run numbers come back and then he's a little bit more of an attractive pick and could also be a value for 2025. We'll see. More will tell. We'll get more answers on that coming as ADP kind of progresses and grows as we get closer to draft season. But guys, coming up next, we finally get to talk about pitchers. Cole Ragans, obviously, where do I think he's going to end up in my rankings? Seth Lugo, is his season actually repeatable that his final breakout was this late in the game? And then Is Kyle Wright even a fantasy option for 2025? We'll find out that and more next. Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace for the NFL, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Price on Game Time app actually go down as you get closer to kickoff. With killer deals and last minute tickets, all in one prices, views from your seat, and the lowest prices guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets for NFL. Last minute deals, save up to 60% on last minute sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Flash deals, save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals, save even more when you choose the section, let Game Time choose the seat. All-in-one pricing, toggle through this feature and show all the up total costs for this seat at checkout so that you don't have any surprises and you know you can make that event. Lowest prices are guaranteed on Game Time, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time's ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for the NFL games this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off for your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today and use last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And all right, we're in the latter half, and let's talk about Cole Ragans. I am so happy that he actually panned out. I was a little bit on the fence of whether I thought this was kind of repeatable. And obviously, I was in my rankings, it reflected that, hey, I had the confidence, right? Like I had him ranked as I think is like a top 24 pitcher. Closer to like 21, 22, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, there was some reservation coming into the season, how he couldn't be successful on the Rangers, how he essentially was traded over there, and then out of nowhere, he's now this like fantastic player. It's kind of hard to kind of like buy into, can he repeat it next year? Even though underlying stats kind of said otherwise, but at the same time, things just kind of go right, and then players also can flop. So, I kind of like wanted to give in like the sexiness. That whole half of last year was just fantastic. I'm so happy it panned out. I'm so happy I didn't go with my mind and I went with my gut and my heart that I thought it was going to be the other way. And man, did he have a great season. Let's like seriously break it down, right? He pitched 32 games, had 186 innings pitched, 223 strikeouts, a lovely 3.14 ERA with a whip of 1.14. He was stellar, stellar all season long. Man, if you drafted him, you were happy, even put away 11 wins to boot. I love this kid. I think he's going to be amazing talent for years to come. He's young too. He's literally 26 years old. And if you're this good, this young as a pitcher, it's going to get even better. Hoping we see a little bit more from his breaking balls in terms of movement. And it's going to take him to the next level. Everything on the underlining stats really there. xERA was a 3.27, a little bit higher than his actual ERA. X batting average was a 2.18. Fastball velocity was at 95.4 miles an hour. Average exit velocity was 88.3. It was perfect. I'm loving it. His chase was at 29.8% of the time. That's great. That means he's being deceptive and getting guys to swing. He's whiffing at 31.8% of the time, getting the strikeout at 29.3% of the time. Love to see him walk just a little bit more. Barreling, wasn't really allowing that. Hard hit contact was at 35.4% of the time. Love to see him produce just a little bit more ground balls to really take that game to a whole nother level and possibly bring that ERA down even more. Cole Ragans is an elite talent that I'm going to be super excited. I think he moves into like the top 15, maybe even top 12 in terms of starting pitchers for 2025. Don't hold me to it. Luckily, we're not close to draft season. I haven't done my rankings yet, but that's where I'm kind of picturing where he might fall. He's on that cusp of, innings to strikeouts. When you had 40 more strikeouts than your innings pitched. And then on top of that, you were also able to produce a lower ERA and be successful with a team that I think is on the rise. As long as I can get a little bit more talent in there. This kid is primed to be fantasy gold, which could thrust him into my top 12. Everything about Cole Ragans screams, I'm going to be one of the next big things in 2025 and for the years to come. So Cole Ragans is a must draft. I cannot wait to see where I'm going to be drafting him and what my confidence level is once I start doing some mocks. But let's move on. Let's talk about Seth Lugo. A season where, honest to God, didn't know. I don't think anybody really saw this coming, right? Because Seth Lugo is on the older side of the thing, and nobody really saw this kind of season coming. 34 years old, and this is his best season by far, um, and was honestly incredible. He's had really good seasons over the last couple of years: 21, a 3.5 ERA, a 22, a 3.6 ERA, and 23, a 3.57 ERA. But the thing that really like took it over the top is he actually pitched quite a bit of innings. Went to 206.2 innings pitched this year, whereas the last highest was 146 the year prior. But then 22, 21 was about 65 and 46, and then obviously 2020 got cut in half. But he's never really pitched that many innings until this year. Now at age 34, maybe there's just enough, not enough miles used on the car, so maybe that he can go out and pump out another season like this. But what scares me about him, excuse me, is the breakout at age 34, along with the innings count. Can he do this again? Can he be this elite? I'm not sure. I think the ERA is definitely realistic. I think it might come more of like a struggle than this year where we had a 3 ERA. The K's have kind of always been on par with what he's doing. But the innings and stuff I think are going to come down next year. I think that, he probably isn't going to pitch 180 since he's really never done it in his career outside of this year. So maybe he gets to 160, but that means less Ks. Hopefully the ERA can stay to 3.5, and then he's a decent pick, but he's definitely not a top 20, top 10 pick. Personally, I don't even know if I'm going to feel comfortable drafting him as my number 3. You think I'm crazy, but at the same time, this is where like I think it was just a magic season for Seth Lugo, and I'd much rather pick a pitcher that's done it before than have a pitcher that is breaking out at age 34. And he's the exception to my rule of the older you get, the more I like the pitcher because they get a little bit more mature. Because usually you start seeing them show a lot in the 30s and able to manage, to have the innings at least to then give you the confidence in that production that it's actually available. Sorry, my computer's about to die. But this is not that case, so therefore I'm not willing to say, hey, we're going to go full send on Seth Lugo in 2025. I'll let you know where I have him ranked, but I think it's going to be on the lower side. But let's move on. Let's talk about Kyle Wright. This will be our last guy for the day. Used to be on the Atlanta Braves. Obviously was hurt with the shoulder injury and things like that. And, wasn't really able to make it out this season, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Yeah, didn't pitch this year at all. And 2023 campaign was ugly, but started off the year hurt and, really never got right. And even when he came back from the injury, he didn't really look as good as he should have. So here's the thing. I'm going to take a flyer on him. Obviously, I think we all should. And try and chase 2022, which was a fantastic season from him, where, he actually showed out and was somebody that you wanted to have on your team. In that time in 2022, he had 180 innings pitched. He had 174 strikeouts. He had an ERA of 3.19 and a WHIP of 1.15. Like, he was 26 years old. He's only going to be 28, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, he's going to be 29 this season. So he's still at that cusp where like he's in his prime for pitching, right? Where I think he's going to start really taking off. So I'm definitely going to take a shot. I don't think he's going to cost much in 2025. I think he's going to be a forgotten name. And the only way he comes into serious fantasy relevance is we start seeing a crazy, crazy spring training for him, or he starts getting hyped up in the media. Kyle Wright can be a very sneaky pick next year that can almost remind you of Tarek Skubal, where he kind of was a name that was completely forgotten, coming off the IL, and then you picked him up, and then boom. I don't think the ceiling is high for him. I think that's too high of an expectation, but just that level of impact on your fantasy team. So don't construe what I'm saying here. I think that fantasy impact can be the same level as Tarek Skubal, the pterodactyl himself, but maybe not that ceiling as high. But if I can even get something relatively close to 2022, and based off of where I think he's going to go, man, he's going to be a great pick. And I think he can be a serious, serious stud going into 2025. So keep your eye on Kyle Wright. Keep him in the back of your head. I promise you're not going to want to miss out on him in 2025. But guys, that's it for today. Please like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, do everything you can to help share this podcast because we truly appreciate it. And check us out on Subtext and become a member of the Diamond Club, where you'll get all this off-season content and get to see our rankings coming soon. And then once you're done checking us out, check out our boy Sully at Locked On MLB covering all the great, well, I wouldn't say great World Series for Yankee fans, but for the Dodgers it is. Check him out. He's breaking them out awesomely. Check him out on there. Great rest of your day, guys. Peace.